welcome. I'm delighted to have the first panel for our COVID Response Awards with 3 of our judges who are going to be talking about their experiences during the pandemic, their thoughts for the future, and what they'll be looking for in an entry for the COVID Response Awards. We've already had some quite inspiring entries of innovation and resilience, and it will be great to hear their thoughts about what they're looking for. So I'd like to welcome today Nicola Murphy, who's the Group CEO of the River Group, Shaun, Hinds, the CEO of Manchester Central, and Lawson, Muncaster, Founder and Managing Director of City AM. It would be great if you could each tell us a little bit about your business and your experiences during the last 16 months. Nicola, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, of course. Nice to see everyone. Morning. So I'm the Group CEO of the River Group. We are a group of 4 businesses set in Marble Arch in London who are marketing services related. So we produce content, everything from video to social media to magazines to books, etc. We have a PR agency, we have a management and marketing consultancy, and we have just set up an influencer talent agency. We work across those 4 businesses for 33 global brands. In the UK, we work for organisations like the Co-op, who had an excellent response to COVID, putting community and the supply chain and their people first, which I thought was excellent. So that's us. We have marketing and advertising went into recession on March the 23rd, 16 or so months ago. And so I won't deny it hasn't been a journey. But that said, we've put on 11 new clients and taken on 63. My talent manager told me yesterday, new people. So we decided to just get on with it and make the best of it. And it's been all right.
Right. Shaun?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Claire. Morning, everyone. So I'm the Chief Exec of Manchester Central. We're the largest conference exhibition space in the centre of Manchester. Normally, we'd be having quite a busy year, hosting somewhere in the region of 250 events, generating somewhere in the region of about £150 million worth of impact into the wider Manchester region. Much like Nicola, it all stopped for us pretty abruptly. We were actually building a show when the confirmation finally came through that we were going into lockdown. So we literally had to stop building and start taking it down, which we did pretty quickly. But then our fortunes were somewhat determined more directly by the pandemic, in that we became one of the Nightingale sites. So there's a whole other podcast in that as well. I could tell you how that happened, but we very quickly, in working with the Army, we worked out that we were a good location for the Northwest planned Nightingale Hospital. And so within about 3 weeks of just post-lockdown, we built a fully functioning care centre in our venue as a hospital, 750 beds. Thankfully, very few of them were ever used, but better to have the backup just in case. But that somewhat determined what we were going to do immediately. But we did, as a business, have to come to terms with quite a dramatic change, going from always being very active, very busy, a very full calendar, everybody kind of knowing where we were going, clear direction, clear ambition, clear vision, to having all of that basically turned upside down, shaken, tipped out across the floor, and then a handful of us kind of looking through the pieces to find out, right, where do we go now? What do we do with all of these bits? But fortunately, we are here. We've come out the other end. We are rebuilding the venue. In fact, we've just about finished rebuilding the venue now back into an event space. Proud to be hosting Manchester International Festival this week, albeit under Tier 3 conditions, so slightly subdued, but nonetheless great to have some activity back in the venue. And hopefully, fingers crossed, everything else, looking forward to a busy autumn. Busy kind of in inverted commas, because I think we wait and see what busy looks like. But at least we have plans and we have intention. So that's good enough for me.
Good. Well, that's certainly better than the last 16 months. Lawson, what about you?
Good morning. City AM is primarily was a newspaper group consisting of a newspaper daily, Monday to Friday, focusing on the business community of London, a commuting business community of London. And very quickly, it was very obvious that if you didn't have a reader and you didn't have an advertiser, you didn't have a paper. So unfortunately, we pulled the paper from the streets in the middle of March and built the business around come back in October, then I come back in December. So very much a start-stop operation, and your mind going from hope to focus to disappointment, and having 3 of those situations arise based on what we thought rather than what was actually happening by government. We took the decision to make a very simple strategy that the paper would return to the streets when there was a commuting audience of more than 50% in London, and that the Waterloo City line would be open to the city. So where we are now is we're probably looking at early September to bring the paper back, which is all very exciting again. But what it has taught me, and I think taught individuals within the company, is that you can use people and their talents very well by refocusing. And the silver lining for us has obviously been that our online business has trebled in both income and people reading and looking at City M both on a local but also international level. So there is a silver lining, a very, very dark cloud. And I think that probably sums up where we are as a business. Obviously, the magazine division hasn't reopened yet. The on business has developed. The events business is on hold, but we hope to come great guns back in October and autumn as well with that.
I mean, it's interesting that you all have had different experiences, but communicating with your stakeholders, whether they be internally with staff or with clients, readers, must have been really important. I mean, Lawson, what did you do in terms of talking to your readers with your plans?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we made the decision pretty quickly. So we probably had 3 more editions left within the timeline of stopping the paper. Stopping and starting is quite easy, but that communication was helped there. But obviously, the online product was the key thing to communicate with that business. And obviously, we'd probably something like 1 million readers a month. We had access to them through online, and you saw a huge surge in all online news products at the beginning, March, April, May of 2020. So people understood pretty quickly the paper wouldn't be on the streets. And to be perfectly honest, they weren't on the streets either. So you know, they're pretty empathetic and pretty loyal reader. So I think that they found themselves pretty quickly on the online product, which showed obviously saw the growth. Communicating staff is totally different because ultimately those that were involved very much in the print product knew that their job was completely obsolete until the paper came back. And we as a business went through CBILS, our own personal equity, putting money into the business to see through the storm. But that unfortunately came to an end in the end of October, where we had to let people go that were focusing totally on the print product. Obviously not a very nice thing to do with a small business, especially a business that's worked together collectively for many years. And again, the focus will be in the return of that paper in September, where we can start employing more people. And in fact, we took our first designer back last week, looking at how we go about not necessarily redesigning the newspaper, but obviously taking the opportunity to have a bit more freshness within the organisation when it comes back. But I think people's brains are not that forgetful. They'll be expecting the product very much along the lines of what they left and loved back in March 2020.
Great to hear you're taking on somebody new. Nicola, what about you? I mean, you've acquired new clients, new staff. I mean, that's a phenomenal achievement, and part of your business is all about communication. So how have you achieved this?
We were pretty lucky. We've got some anchor clients at River that we've worked with for, our longest standing client is Holland & Barrett. We've worked with them for 27 years, since I set the business up in 1994. So our second longest standing client, Superdrug, part of the AS Watson Group, 19 years. The cooperative group that I talked about in the intro is our 16th year of working with them. You know, these people don't just go away. We're fortunate that we work a lot in health and food retail. So those businesses, for the most part, while depressed in terms of footfall, very much went online, but they also had traffic, particularly in food retail, and their community-based businesses being chemists and healthcare providers and food providers. So they, you know, they still needed to communicate with their customers. The magazine side of the business, much like Lawson said, was depressed, and some of our print product we switched to being fully online. And therefore the journey that we were already on as a business before the pandemic, we were probably 60% digital and social media and 40% print. I would say it's about 75-25 now. We use the time, we work, I'm here today in a really nice office in Hyde Park that I'd get rid of if I could, because I probably don't need it anymore, with a lot of space. So we built a TV studio, we already had a podcast studio, and we went very hard after visual and audio media. And digital and social media, much like Lawson said, and we accelerated the journey that we were already on. The sad bit of that from a colleague perspective was that we had some people that were print first, and what I learned as a boss, as the owner of a business, is I probably hadn't spent as much time, money, didn't have the foresight that the pandemic was coming to educate purely print people in more digital. So I did have to let some people go, like Lawson. We've been slowly bringing them back, but I've also taken on 60 odd new people who are very much digital and social media focused. So that side of the business has seen an acceleration. But in terms of communication, it's an owner-run business like Lawson. So we decided as a board of directors that we were going to put people before profit. We only put very few people out to furlough, and we only let them go at the point where we had to. And as I say, we're bringing them back like Lawson is. The communication was every week I would send an email out to people saying, it's all a bit shit, isn't it? But here's some good news. We decided to be open and honest, and I think that was appreciated. What I didn't expect was that tonight, every Friday I write this is what happened last week and this is what we look forward to next week email, and it will be week 69. If I'd realised I'd created such a rod for my own back, I maybe wouldn't have started the practice, but I think it's brought me much closer to my colleagues, and it's certainly given me a great appreciation of them. In regards to clients, my managing director, who's worked with me for 16 years, Jackie, and I sat down virtually with each client and said, please, no bullshit. We're an owner-run business. We've got 100 and odd people. They've got mortgages. They've got kids. They've got food to buy. What work realistically will you take away, and what do you think we can keep, and can we innovate in any way at all, and what about advertising revenue, and how are we going to keep that coming in? And we lost 2 clients out of what was 25 at the time. One of them has come back, one sadly hasn't because they're in travel, but we're hopeful for that. So we let people out of their contracts. We just said, we're not going to hold you to a contract that pays us a lot of money if we're not producing a product for you because you're not open, or people can't get on a cruise ship. And I think that level of humanity was much appreciated, but I won't deny that it was a bit touch and go at the beginning. We've been really incredibly lucky, and a lot of businesses haven't, and I'm very thankful for that.
Wow, really impressive story though. I think that change in relationship is something we've seen across so many businesses, about how people relate to each other in a more sort of personal, sort of real way. Shaun, what about you? Because the events industry has obviously been really hit hard. What's your relationship been with your staff? How have you managed them?
Yes, I suppose we are the ultimate analog business in a way, and I very much take on board what both Nicola and Lawson were talking about in terms of print. But the events industry literally, of course, relies on people physically coming together. So we were stopped, and we also had all sorts of challenges around getting recognition because of the kind of diverse nature of the industry. So making sure that some of the government support schemes would apply to our circumstances was quite a learning experience in the early days for us. But in terms of the team, we were fortunate in that our systems were really well geared up for remote working. So we were able to replicate all of the stuff that we have inside the office via people's homes pretty immediately, actually. So the team had almost by accident had done a great job of actually getting us ready for that kind of, it's the sort of the business disruption, business continuity folder that you have stuck in your shelf that you rarely go to, because there's never going to be a situation where we can't get into the office for an extended period of time, surely. But anyway, we grabbed those folders, but luckily the systems kind of played ball, and much like everyone else, we appreciated the fact that everyone was going through their own version, if you like, of this pandemic, because for different people it meant different things. People were directly affected either from a healthcare perspective or knew somebody that was affected. People may have particular reasons to for greater levels of concern. So we also adopted an approach of everything that we tried to do was about preserving jobs and making sure that we looked after our people as best we could, putting our resources into that as effectively as we could. In the end, however, by the time we got to November last year, we knew that we were going to have to make some changes, and we did see a change to our teams. I mean, like a venue business, many of our team, their jobs are about coming into the venue and delivering that experience. And so, much like if you're in the print industry, there was no job. And equally, we felt that we weren't able to guarantee that support was going to be able to continue forever. And therefore, in some ways, it was almost fair to let people have an opportunity if they wanted to try and do something else that they could. So we developed a voluntary scheme where people could elect to effectively, leave the business and look for something different. And we actually got a fair take up. I mean, we're not a big company. We at our peak, we were employing about 126 people, but approximately 50% of the team chose to leave at that point in time for us. And so that enabled them to go off and explore other opportunities for them. But of course, the wider landscape was so decimated. It wasn't like a normal, if you like, redundancy situation where you might leave one company and you might then go and work for another company in a similar space. Of course, that was not going to be the case. But certainly keeping in touch with people that have left the business, many of them have gone on and explored other things, and a few of them are still there waiting for a return, and inevitably at some point we might be able to bring them back into the business as well. In terms of customer communication, well, much like Nicola was saying, you would pore over the contracts at the early stages of this, looking for the clause that was going to give us the redemption or the insight to deal with the situation that we were looking at. But inevitably, those times looking at the contract failed to deliver an answer. And in the end, I think pragmatism was the name of the game. And I think as an industry, we all went through this. I think there was a time when we weren't sure whether we were dealing with something which was 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I mean, we have examples of shows that moved like 3 or 4 times because they thought that it'll be okay by then, surely by the time we get to September, it'll be okay. But we managed to reach, agreements with pretty much everybody, actually, in terms of either moving their show to a different date, and many of those shows have been rolled around into future years yet to come. Sadly, for our industry, where we've got either international events or national events, some of them are on a kind of cycle, and if you miss that cycle, they then move on. So there'll be some events that we just won't see. But we were able to utilize some of our digital investment in keeping communication with clients via virtual tours. We'd invested in a 3D digital model of the venue, for example. We were able to conduct site visits for those businesses that were still actually planning and looking ahead into next year and so on. We were able to keep that communication going. So there has been some digital progress that I think we've made as a business, which has been accelerated by the pandemic, and we will certainly use that. And again, much like Nicola was saying, we also invested in studio capability as well, because we feel that coming back, there will be an element of digital accompanying the live event, and we wanted to make sure that our facilities were as good as they can be for those organizers that want to do that. So we've got that ready to go. Once we get people back in the room, we'll have that digital window as well, which hopefully we'll be able to use effectively.
You all three of you have mentioned technology and digital transformation being at the heart of how you've responded. And do you see that continuing? I mean, Lawson, with your paper, and obviously it's going back to print, but do you see more technology coming into your operations?
I mean, I think that what people are sort of misplaced in their comment about digital investment is actually if I just simply isolate it in my little world, the greatest or the lack of London's inability to deal with a couple of flakes of snow, be it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, educated us about not having a paper on a particular day and how you communicate, how do people communicate internally with your clients, etc. That was pretty seamless. The infrastructure was very much already there to take away the physical product. So I think a lot of businesses had that ability straight away. It was just they were using it more, and along came a thing called Zoom. But to be fair, video conferencing was happening when I was at CNN back in horrible days, which was September 11. So I think we actually used the capacity of that investment over the last 20, 30 years. Indeed, especially London, I think it's been managed to almost move from a physical world to an online world almost on a day. I've not heard really many stories of companies saying, "Oh, I couldn't talk to staff, or I couldn't talk to clients, or we couldn't get the financial community together." That hasn't happened. I think what happened after that was we had the idea that this was the new world and everything else before was going to go away, and we're all going to do what we're doing today. I think the resurgence of people starting to think, actually, Zoom, being at home is actually not what I like doing. I actually am a human being and I want to interact with people. So I think the events business, both domestically and internationally, will come back with a bang. I just don't think you get the same value on Zoom and these kind of seminars than you do with a physical action. I think the importance for us, not necessarily City M, but the importance for London or any city centre or an events business, will be to try and talk about the destination. Why is someone coming to a particular place? It's not just because they're going to pick the paper up, or it's not just going to come to do work. So I see a lot of big cities right now talking about how do we get a commuting population coming back as a destination. So I come to my work, I go to the pub, I go to a restaurant, I go to theatre, I go to cultural events, I go to the gym, all these things have to become part of that person's day. And these people that have been at home for so long are beginning to miss that. So I think you'll see a massive investment program on communicating that message. The real difficulty is probably not so much for those that maybe like me, that I've been back to London since the beginning of the year. It'll be more like, how do we communicate to people that are genuinely scared? Because we've invested 16 months of fearing them, and now we're going to have to take them back out of that fear. So I think there's a psychological and a communication job to be done both at the government level and obviously local structures that are set up to do just that. So be that London First, GLA, TfL, London Partners. I'm just speaking specifically in the London area, which I know pretty well. And I would imagine that's the same in Manchester, Glasgow, Aberdeen, or New York. So I think we've got a hell of a lot of work to do, but what that work is actually physically getting people to get their minds together and actually physically doing things. And I looked at the TL figures only last week, and we've moved from a 20% footfall to a Friday 2 weeks ago to almost 50%. So people are actually moving, but it's not those 50 that are genuinely wanting to do it and get back. It's the 50 that are sitting back home saying, "Ooh, I'm not too sure." So there's a huge job to be done, both at a private level, public level, and it will take its time. So it's not like a switch that we flick on and flick off. And I think any business that thinks that will be caught out. So technology was there. I think we've all used it pretty effectively. I think there could be a case of chasing fool's gold. In some respects, we focus much more on what can we do for the new future. So we've spent the majority of our time rebuilding a website, investing a hell of a lot on that. How do we accommodate more people coming to the website, the speed, the efficiency, the look, etc., as opposed to just saying, this is the ultimate product, this will be the only product. Just put it in sort of mathematical terms, online contributed to something like 20% of our business before the pandemic. So overnight, we lost 80%. That's a hit for anybody. So how you actually work that through and get yourself an understanding of where do you go from there. So that's put a lot of people into the think box, and how do we do that? But again, back to people. the people that you employ hopefully are the ones that you believe are doing well for your business, and situations like this demonstrate that. So I think, again, we're very lucky to have the people that work for us pre-COVID, and obviously the ones that are working with us during this period, and now obviously coming out the other end. So I think a lot of businesses that have invested in people prior to COVID were the ones that will probably come out better for it.
Nicola, you're actually in the office at the moment. Are most of your team in the office, and how are they feeling? Or are you inviting them back in? Do you want them back in the office, or are they going to be working from home, flexible? What are your thoughts on that?
I'd absolutely love to get rid of my office, because it would put an awful lot of money back on my bottom line, straight to my EBITDA. That would be lovely. But sadly, I'm in a commercial agreement, and I do feel for commercial landlords in central London that doesn't run out for another 3 years. So I've got them, and I've tried, and like Shaun, I've poured over that contract and I can't get out of it. So we're using the space in a different way. We're getting rid of desks and chairs for the most part, and we've got a beautiful space with 2 gardens here. We're going to make it look like a WeWork. I built a bar and it's open all the time, and it's stacked full of teas, coffees, booze, and people are starting to come back. We're not making people come back. The office is open every day of the week, and I would say out of 120 or so full-time people, the most we've had was yesterday, and there were about 30 people here. On the 19th of July, we will be coming back, and it's a mandatory requirement unless there are health or other reasons, psychologically, where people are frightened or concerned. 3 days a fortnight, so 6 days a month working in the office, and the remainder of the time working from anywhere. I've got people that have gone overseas, gone back home, and I'm comfortable with that. But the reason for that was we did a poll. It's an owner-run business. We can do what we like, pretty much. So that poll, that anonymous poll, and it is anonymous, has birthed a dog. So we have an office dog who comes in on the train with me. He's a mini Daxi. We finish at 4 o'clock on a Friday. We built a bar in the pandemic, which switching the office up with plants and sofas and free this and that and the other. But we also asked people what they would be comfortable with doing. If we ask them now, I think they would probably say half-half, just from the feeling I'm getting from talking to people. But back then, we did this poll about 12 or 13 weeks ago. 3 days a fortnight in 3-day blocks was what people voted for. So you'll effectively be in 2 teams, A's and B's, to allow for any kind of social distancing that people might feel is necessary for their own personal safety. 1 week on and 1 week off, so 3 days, so let's say Tuesday to Thursday if you're at the A's, week 1, and then again week 3, 2 and 4 if you're the B's, and so on. And we're going to try it for 3 months. That's our commitment as a test. If we feel it isn't enough for the business, then we will ask people again what they're comfortable with, and move up gradually. And I would imagine, I agree with what Lawson said. I think people will not look forward to it, and there'll be a few moans, but they'll come back because it's mandatory. And then, having got back over a period of weeks and been with their colleagues, they'll remember what they're missing, and it will most definitely benefit the 60 odd people that I've taken on, most of whom I haven't met. Yeah. And also the younger people who really, I have 6 children, and only 3 of them are currently in work, the other 3 are at university. And I know my daughter Ali, who works for an advertising agency, she's really missed coming in on their grad scheme after university, learning from her boss. It's fine for us, fat cats, if you like, who made our careers for the most part, to say, well, we know what we're doing and we can work perfectly happily at home. How does anybody else learn? It's really hard. So I think it's particularly important. And for us, because we're in the creative industries, working like this on Zoom for a designer or an editor or a journalist, it's not great. They can do it, of course they can, and they've done it very ably, but they need to bounce off other creatives to innovate and have a nice time. So, long answer to a short question, we're not making them come back until the 19th of July, and then only in little bite-sized chunks.
It is a fundamental shift, though. I mean, it's going to be really, I'm really interested to see what happens and the implications for city centres. I mean, Shaun, we were talking earlier about Manchester and the influence of media to confidence. I mean, it must have an impact for you. And what are your thoughts about, I mean, events, your staff need to be there once events get going.
Yeah, quite. Well, we rely on a sort of vibrant city centre, because when people come to an event at our place, they're experiencing part of what, you know, Manchester's got to offer: bars, restaurants, hotels, you know, things to see, things to do. International visitors coming in when they used to would come to the event, but, you know, either their partner or they themselves may then go off and do other things as well. So, you know, a busy, vibrant city centre relies on, you know, customers being around. Those customers are commuters, residents, visitors, tourists, business tourists, and so on. Otherwise, you don't get the fancy bars, restaurants, attractions in a city centre if there's no patronage. So the two are, you know, complementary in that respect. And so we're like everybody, we're keen to see a return of some sort of, you know, footfall into the venue, into the city, because I think it's complementary to what we're doing in the venue, and equally people coming to the venue brings people into the city as well. So so that's important. We've got a relatively quiet August for various reasons. So we're taking a decision to sort of just pause on bringing people back probably till September. What we're trying to do, funnily enough, is we're trying to protect as much of the workforce as we can as we go through September and October from getting pinged. You know, this is the new story, isn't it? It's like you walk outside and before you know it, you've been zapped. So we're trying to ensure that we can avoid that as best we can by not necessarily bringing people in if we don't need to bring them in. And in fact, just this week, we've done a communique to the team, giving them the advice and the guidance on how that return is going to be. For some people in our business, they've actually been coming into the venue every day as normal, whether it's security, building management, those kind of guys. They've come all the way through when we were a hospital, the whole lot. And then you've got other people that have been on furlough pretty much for the duration of this pandemic. And then you've had other people that have been working from home. So we've got the full mixed bag that we're going to try and bring back. But we're hopeful that, you know, come September, when the first larger scale events take place, that will be met with, you know, a busier city centre, and, you know, where people feel that they're actually getting a part of the experience, because that, like I say, part of our proposition is being located in the centre of the city as we are. You get a real sense of Manchester, and that's one of the great attractions. And you know, if Manchester were to remain at its current levels of footfall and occupation, it would be a very different place, and you wouldn't get that same experience. And so I think it will take a while, I think, for that confidence to return, and for companies to find the right kind of cadence and pace of how many people are going to be back at any one time. And, you know, in Manchester, we've got the full gamut of those companies that are saying, right, come the 19th, everyone's back in the office. That's it. No more of this working from home, right through to other bigger companies saying, you know what, we're pretty much vacating our centre space. We're going to keep it, probably because we have to, but it'll be more of a hub where people can come and congregate a few times a week, a few times a month, something like that. So it'll be interesting to see where the level settles on this one. But you know, reflecting on something that was said earlier, you know, what all of this will do, hopefully, is it will give a greater appreciation for those times when people do want to come together and do want to congregate. And because it won't be perhaps something that's happening every day, there'll be a greater emphasis around those times when it does happen, which hopefully will lead to more vibrant, rewarding, fulfilling live experiences. And just real briefly before I stop talking, which was, I think some of the shows that we used to have in pre-COVID probably just existed. You know, they happened because they happened last year, and they probably lost a little bit of direction, and they'd lost their sense of purpose. And probably some of those shows won't come back because Zoom, Teams, video meetings, YouTube, whatever, it can replace what people were getting out of that. But conversely, there'll be those other events where actually people are so grateful for the opportunity to be physically together for potentially a limited period of time that there'll be a real looking forward to certain gatherings and certain types of events, which I think will lead to a better industry and a better series of activities taking place. So I think it'll be it's a great shakedown of stuff that probably should have gone a few years ago, to be replaced by stuff that's really, when it happens, it's really valuable to people in lots of different ways.
Yes, a great experience and a great driver to get people to attend when they know it's going to be a really good experience. Lawson, are you optimistic about the next 12 months?
I think we'll touch on 2 points. I think the idea of the 19th of July is quite a significant mark for, I think, most businesses, especially SMEs and people involved in what we're doing. We've taken a slightly different approach where we'll have everyone back in for the first 2 weeks to see how it's all going to work. I think dialogue between management and staff is going to be very important. I also believe that staff will be appreciated and listened to, but management has to be quite clever in how they do things. It can't be a free fall. I mean, what I've learned, like all the sort of CEO guys I've sort of spoken to in the banking, but basically London perspective, and is that they've been able to stagnate pretty well in this period through technology. If Britain PLC in London and Manchester want to work in this global stage, by going completely online, you're actually creating yourself, your workforce as a global priority. So if you want to work from home 5 days a week and be paid a London salary or Manchester salary, please bear in mind that job can go anywhere else in the world, okay? As destinations, we want to be London, the great city in Britain and Europe and world, whatever. If it doesn't have those attractions and fancy restaurants or whatever, we will also suffer. So we've got a huge collective responsibility to getting this right. And I don't think if you take America's position where other countries are going to, they're standing up strong and being very much wanting to create this sort of destination, both that from a commuter or international travel, whatever. There's a lot of bridges to go across, and it's a public good thing. I think governments, I mean, you don't get any political equity demanding people to go back to work when they're quite enjoying themselves at home. So getting these people back is going to be quite difficult, right? We've seen that before. Positivity, I think when people do come back, I think they'll come back with a bang. I do genuinely think city centres will. I mean, we just have to look at what's happening with England and Wembley. I don't need to necessarily mention that, but, as a Scotsman who I do want you guys to win on Sunday night, because if you do, we'll be the only team that you didn't beat winning the European trophy. So I think that's quite a nice point to make. But you can see what these events do to people. I don't see many scared people going to Wembley, that's for sure. So there is a huge amount of optimism there. But it will be different. And I think the flexibility part will change. Well, how that dynamic works Monday to Friday, I don't know. If I look back pre-COVID, a City M regular reader would pick the paper up 2.5 times a week because they're either traveling, right, or they're working from home. So, the people have already been doing this for 20, 30 years, So I think that will change. But it will be, if you've got boarded up businesses, right, with dirty streets and nobody on them, Britain PLC is in trouble. We have to be really, really understanding this is a huge challenge for the whole country. And the pragmatism has to be very, very clear. If you remove Britain PLC from being a top, I would argue it's probably the best country in the world to work and live in anyway. But if you remove that status, we as a country will really suffer. So there's a huge challenge in front of us. I have a massive respect for the British people and the British businesses, so I don't see that happening at all. I think it will come back with a bang. I'm relatively optimistic bloke anyway. But let's also don't be hoodwinked into believing when you're going down the local exchange centre or whatever, when you're seeing all these pubs and restaurants fully blooming with lots of people outside that. That's because at the moment there's only probably 25 to 35% of them open. Right, to actually achieve some sort of status, and as a city centre, you need about 75% of them open and being full as well. So there's a long way to go. I do think people will be sick and tired of it. I think it might internationally, obviously, for Manchester. I feel for you, but that will take more time. But I do remember sitting in New York after September 11 and being told by a very senior CEO that business travel was finished for good. So the doomsday people will be out there again. And the financial side of businesses will be loving the idea that they don't have to have offices and they can do this and they can do that. That will be very strong in people's balance sheets and looking at them. But I don't think that's the future. I think there's a balance between where we go. I think the biggest significant change will be how people actually work in terms of time. And that time spent on what it is during a clock day, what hours they work, but more importantly, when they do interact with people, when they don't. But I'm going to fall on the side of optimism. People need people for culture, I think for mental well-being, for collective responsibility, and more importantly, for growth. And if you want your business to grow or you want your country to grow, that's so important. All we've done is stagnate. And you know what happens if you don't have growth? You fail. Right? So there's a huge challenge in front of us. But I believe that challenge will be met by PLC Britain and the people that support it and work within it.
Nicola, I mean, I'm interested from your business point of view, but also how you think your corporates are feeling about the outlook for the next year.
I'm like Lawson. I'm a glass overflowing kind of person. So I think my view is that we will come back. I think that one great thing that's come out of the pandemic is the recognition that businesses should trust their people more, because the majority of people, not all, people want to do a decent job, but they also want a better work-life balance, and I think that's been helpful. Do I think our economic outlook will suddenly rise in the next year? I think it will be a slow upward upscale. I think the corporates that we work with, it depends which country. We work globally. If we're talking specifically UK, I think we've got other issues than the pandemic around Brexit that are going to affect businesses adversely. So it really depends on which of those brands and businesses you would look at. I think a lot of what we do is in health and food retail from a content perspective, and I think those people are cautiously optimistic. I think one of the main issues for any business, whether it's a fish and chip shop, a marketing agency, a newspaper, a venue, or the Bank of England, is going to be getting the right balance with their colleagues and talent in the business, such that the general view and the culture develops, and management, to Lawson's point, listen to their teams, and the right balance is struck for the majority. It's never going to be, nobody's ever going to feel that they've got everything they want, but there does need to be a positive compromise around getting people back to work such that businesses can go forward. So I'm optimistic, but I think it will take some time.
How's your optimism level, Shaun?
My optimism, well, it's I think we've gone through so many ups and downs that I got to a point where I sort of stopped looking forward too eagerly to stuff, because you ended up getting dashed. And of course, for our business, we needed things to be kind of normal again, and so it became difficult. But what I've got, the evidence that I've got, is I've got a relatively busy calendar, sort of autumn onwards. There's a lot of eagerness amongst organisers to actually get their live events back up and running again. I think we're all a little bit unsure at the moment in terms of what the attendance might look like in terms of numbers, and how that might affect events. Like anything, like theatres or any kind of arena, you build venues and arenas to scale, because that's how the economics work. So a theatre of 1,000 seats can't run on 300 people, and equally a venue like ours, we can't run on just smaller meetings. We rely on large scale gatherings. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the pace at which the audiences build continues. I don't want to be. I will be slightly. There are for me some disproportionately loud voices out there that will suppress the situation for longer, I think. But it's a difficult one, because people do have genuine reasons for concern in many cases. And of course, because of that, when it's most of what we do is work related. So unlike going to the football where you make your own decision as an individual, if it's work related, or if your company is paying for you to attend or to go or to be a sponsor of something, that it's going to take longer, I think, for that corporate confidence to get to a point where they say, yeah, actually, we're happy to commit to that again. We're happy to put our people back into that environment. So I think it's a slightly longer outlook for my core business events. But I think if I was in the individual or leisure personal event business, I'd be a little bit more optimistic, because I think there is going to be a massive explosion back into stuff like that. And we've got a couple of shows up in Manchester coming up, not that we're involved in, but the Park Life Festival, Warehouse Project, which is a massive kind of club scene season that runs in the autumn, where you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, these events sell out like that. They sell out in hours, hundreds of thousands of tickets. So there's no shortage of demand, no shortage of eagerness for people to get back out there. But I think it will, in the business events sector, I think it'll take a bit of time to get to the levels we were at. And so what that means for us is that we've got to be a bit more ingenious in how we attract different types of events, maybe diversify a little bit, and put the venue to alternative uses. This week, for example, we're hosting some shows for the International Festival in Manchester, which we wouldn't normally do because we'd normally be busy with other things. And actually the volumes of people coming to the events are relatively small, but it's great to see the venue being utilized. It's great to have people back in, and it's a great stepping stone towards normalized activity. So I think if I take a longer view, then I'm very optimistic, but I think we've still got a bit more toughing out to do before we get there.
You spoke about being creative and innovative, and it's certainly something which we're seeing in the entries to the COVID Response Awards. And I'm just interested to finish off on some ideas as to what you'll be looking for winning entry from the awards. What factors do you think are important, Nicola?
I think resilience over this period, and to still have a brand or business that's operational, still giving people jobs, still giving customers services and products to buy, is a great big tick in the box. Having kept going and showing innovation and ingenuity in order to do so is something that I'll be looking for. Transformation of goods and services, and finding a way to get through and growing other revenue streams like Lawson's done online. I think that level of not giving up is something that my dear departed dad said to me. If I give you one piece of advice, it's just in business, you've just got to keep going because you don't know what's around the corner. And so for me, those businesses that have managed to keep going, to keep giving goods and services, and most importantly, keeping their people, as many of them as possible, in work, then they get a big high five from me. So resilience is what I'll be looking for primarily.
Lawson?
I think I might have said this before, but the week before COVID came upon us, we were having a City M lunch in the city with a grandee called Martin Gilbert, who was the residing CEO and starter of Aberdeen Asset, and the success story that from where he took it from to where it was. And one of the journalists asked the question, what was your key thoughts in the time? And you were expecting exuberance, confidence, talent, everything that you thought about. He said, no, it's one word. It's called survival. And it was ironic that was the week before it all started. And actually all the sleepless nights, etc., the one word in my head was survival. And that dictates how you change and adapt and move forward. And I suppose that's where I'm looking for. I mean, what I'm not looking for is, and I've come across it myself, so I'm blaming myself as well. So it's not a negative, but it's something you can do. It's chasing the fool's gold. I spent far too much time in the beginning thinking that my business was all about creating tiny wee seminars. It wasn't that way. That's not what my business is. But I thought that was the future, and I fell in the surf of that optimism and that where people wanted me to go. So admitting those mistakes early on and changing the dynamic of what you're trying to do, and go back to the word survival. What is my core business? Who's the core reader? What, etc. So that's where I'll be specifically looking for. If those businesses that A, wanted to survive, B, adapted well, but actually chased the right alleyways and not going up the ones with a dead end.
Good. Shaun, what about you?
I echo those points. I'd probably add just a sort of purpose around it as well. I think there's been some great sort of social movements, real good examples of people genuinely wanting to help and do things which have contributed either to the response to the pandemic or just helped, you know, their community or the areas that they've been working in. So I think, you know, really applying their capability or their resources to deliver something with purpose. And yeah, something just a little bit, you know, a real great example of adaptation and creativity rather than some of the perhaps more mundane, obvious things like, you know, getting into the hand sanitizer business or something like that, which plenty of companies have done and done well. But I think we've moved on from that, and I think we need to reflect back over this time with a sense of you know, what fundamental, lasting, sustainable changes have we seen out of this. And I think within the submissions there'll be some examples of businesses and people that have done things that have been of that moment around the pandemic response, but actually will lead to a continuation or a furthering of that particular endeavor for new ventures, you know, in the future. So yeah, we shall see.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all so much for your time. It's been fantastic to talk to you. Lots of great reflections and thoughts for the future. Thank you very much.